posted online. Farida Morakhani, whose late father was married to the Ayatollah's sister, said the Iranian government knew no rules except force and maintaining power. Ms. Morakhani is believed to be in prison in Iran, but it's not clear when or where the video was filmed. Mike Thompson reports.
Ms. Morakhani, a well-known rights activist, said the outside world should stop dealing with what she called the murderous and child-killing regime in Tehran. This is in reference to the more than 60 protesters aged under 18 reported to have been killed by Iranian security forces during unrest sparked by the death in custody of Mahsa Amini, who'd been arrested for failing to cover her hair correctly. The video was shared online by her brother Mahmoud, a self-declared opponent of the Tehran government now living in France. Farida Morakhani was arrested a few days ago and is believed to be being held in Iran's notorious Evin prison.
The Italian government has announced a state of emergency on the island of Ischia in the Gulf of Naples, which was hit by landslides yesterday. 4 people are confirmed dead, another 10 are still missing. Houses were buried in mud and cars and buses were swept into the sea after days of torrential rain. Our correspondent Mark Lowen is there.
On the seafront down here in Ischia, the impact of the mudslide is clear, with cars smashed up and battered, hurled into each other, mangled metal, shattered glass, and then some vehicles even tossed into the sea. Such was the force of the cascading earth and debris that poured down the hill here. It began before dawn on Saturday, when the deepest and most sudden rainfall on record here prompted a sudden landslide, burying houses, many illegally built and vulnerable. Up the hill and desolate, we met Raffaella, whose shop had been destroyed by a mountain of mud. My son feels ill because he's seeing all our sacrifices were worthless, she says. I hope someone will help us. I have no words. As the clean-up continues, the rescue helicopters whir overhead. They search for areas where more bodies may be found, from the moment the earth broke away here, engulfing what lay in its path, an island overwhelmed by itself. Now sport, and there's been some surprising results from today's action so far at the Football World Cup in Qatar, while Spain and Germany prepare to face each other in just under an hour's time. With more on that and the rest of the sports news, here's Shabnam Yunus-Jewel.
The Belgian manager Roberto Martinez has admitted his side played with a fear of losing after their shock 2-0 defeat to Morocco at the World Cup in Qatar. It means the Belgians now have to win their final group game to qualify for the knockout stages. That's against Croatia, who have just beaten the eliminated Canada 4-1 to top Group F. Germany sit bottom of Group E going into their match with Spain tonight at 7. Anything but a win for Hansi Flick's side would mean that their fate is out of their own hands going into the final game. Earlier, Japan lost 1-0 to Costa Rica. England forward Marcus Rashford says they don't need fans to boo to know they haven't played well following their lacklustre goalless draw against the USA. England are still top of Group B, heading into their final game against Wales on Tuesday, with the Welsh needing a win and other results to go their way to have a chance of progressing. Wales midfielder Joe Allen says they have to believe.
Not impossible, no. It's a tough task. It's always uncomfortable when it's obviously not in your hands and you're relying on certain things to unfold. But whilst there's still a chance, you know, it's really simple for us. We're fully motivated and fully incentivised to throw absolutely everything into getting a win.
The Rugby Football Union will conduct a review into England's disappointing autumn campaign, but to stop short of offering their backing to head coach Eddie Jones. England have 1 win from 4 matches. And in tennis, Canada have won the Davis Cup for the first time by beating Australia 2-0 in the final.
Shabnam Yunus-Jewel. The headlines again. Protests against China's stringent COVID restrictions have spread, with some people openly calling for President Xi Jinping to stand down. The Transport Secretary, Mark Harper, has urged rail unions to agree to changes to working practices in order to free up savings to fund pay rises. Research has suggested that too many people in the UK are being let down at the end of their lives by inadequate out-of-hours care support. Police say the murders of 2 16-year-old boys in south-east London are linked. And the Italian government has announced a state of emergency on the island of Ischia, which was hit by landslides yesterday. At least 4 people have died. BBC News.
And this evening's newsreader was Alan Smith. This is BBC Radio 4. The Archers is in 45 minutes. But first, and to get us in the mood...
Hello, this is Pick of the Week.
My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard and they're like, it's better than yours, damn right, it is better than yours. I can teach you but I have to charge. My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard and they are like, it is better than yours. Damn right, it is better than yours. I can teach you but I have to charge. I know you want it, the thing that makes me want the guys go crazy for they lose their mind. The way I wind, I think it's time. La 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 la, warm it up. La 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 la. My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. They're like, it's better than yours. Damn right, it is better than yours. I can teach you, but I have to charge. My milkshake brings all the boys to the yard. They are like, it is better than yours.
Dan, very good. And well done not being distracted by the sound of the audience hammering on the emergency doors.
Jan Ravens as Khalees via the Archers on I'm Sorry, I Haven't a Clue. A fittingly wonky start to this edition of Pick. I'm Mubin Azar and we've made it through another 7 days of climate emergency, political pantomime, and this week's special offer, a FIFA boss having a go at some improvisational comedy.
Today I feel Qatari. Today I feel Arab. Today I feel African. Today I feel gay. Today I feel disabled. Today I feel a migrant worker. I'm European. Actually, I am European. Not just I feel European. I think for what we Europeans have been doing in the last 3,000 years around the world, we should be apologizing for the next 3,000 years before starting to give moral lessons. Reform and change takes time. It took hundreds of years in our country. This moral lesson giving, one-sided, it's just hypocrisy. So I wonder why nobody recognizes the progress that has been made. I don't have to defend in any way whatsoever Qatar. They can defend themselves. I'm defending football here.
Sounds like Gianni Infantino was having an out-of-body experience, simultaneously feeling African, gay and disabled, and also like a migrant worker, whilst in reality being none of those things. The usually hilarious Shaparak Khorsandi was in a more sober mood and not supporting the Iranian team this week. Instead, during the live match, she was speaking to the world at one.
Football is not just a game, it is a culture. And had Iran been a free country, this would have been just such an enormous game for us. But I cannot emotionally bring myself to watch it, because this team today is not representing what I believe my country of origin is and is being represented. So.
Of course, there's huge pressure on the players. We were talking about what seemed pressure on the England, but we've seen that what seemed pressure on the England team to wear an armband and has chosen not to. It doesn't really compare, does it? They've chosen not to wear.
Well, it's really difficult with the team. Like the armband is right. Had that not happened, I may have watched today. Right. So it isn't just about the Iranian team. I'll be honest with you. It is the grubbiness of this entire tournament, where if it was being black being illegal in Qatar, if it was being Chinese was illegal, you get arrested, no one would play.
right? But we do not take homophobia as seriously as racism. We do not take misogyny as seriously as racism. It is a disgrace that in a country where our lionesses would not be able to play. I can't begin to tell you how problematic I feel all of this is, or all of the reasons why I'm sitting in my kitchen with my dogs rather than watch and talking with you. There's no way I would be on the radio had this been anywhere other than Qatar, I think.
There are a lot of reasons to be upset about the World Cup. The trashing of human dignity is not that complicated an issue to take a stance on. But if you looked at social media this week, it would most likely scramble your brain. For every tweet about human rights violations in Qatar, there was a rebuttal about colonial history. Every reference to the reality of workers' rights was met with a reference to the transatlantic slave trade. The word hypocrisy is often used in this context to try to shut people up. And then there's the crowd who will say you shouldn't make things political, failing to understand that all of life is political. When we overlook that, it's a choice. The psychologist John Amici, who made his name as an elite basketball player in the US, had this to say on The World at One.
This is about justice and integrity and courage, things that FIFA says it has in abundance. So it's not about individual causes, it's about alignment with what these organizations say they stand for, something they fail to do at every turn.
Okay, now FIFA has released a statement saying that it's an inclusive organization that wants to put football to the benefit of society by supporting good and legitimate causes, but it has to be done within the framework of the competition regulations.
Yeah, that's sophistry of the highest order. I mean, that is literally a word salad. I understand what each of those individual words mean, but it stands for absolutely nothing. All it does is take a small look at the mission, vision, and values of an organization like FIFA. But that is what should count.
Okay, so John, I mean, in a way, this was known before the armband came up. I mean, you're angry with them at not sort of allowing the wearing of an armband. Are you also angry at them to awarding it to Qatar in the first place? And then you could start saying, well, also Russia, and then Midas trying to get the Olympics. I mean, you could keep going on. Is any country good enough? Is any country in a situation that is sort of clean enough to be able to host these games?
Let's be clear first that we should not conflate a government with its people, because when we do that, we're all reasonably damned under that condition. So this is not about the people of Qatar. This is about what the government and the ruling authorities of Qatar choose to do. All governments make mistakes. All governments have committed over time atrocities. This is not my plea that there are some that are good and some that are bad, that Western is better than Eastern or something like that. This is simply about the organizations themselves. Principle is not defended by critiquing a partnership that you've already made. Principle is defended by judging whether a partnership should be made based on the principles you already have. No, it shouldn't have gone to Qatar, because people who are in those stadium seats should know that they are sitting meters away from where the body of somebody fell in the building of that. 6,500 people at minimum.
It's heavy going. I know lots of people who look to things like the World Cup as an escape from the grind of daily life. But I reckon it's possible to be politically informed and engaged, and also to be happy. It helps if you have nice people around you. And this week, lots of nice people sang to me.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Steve. Happy birthday to you. Look at the dinosaur. Oh, it's so beautiful. It's so ridiculous.
Well done, well done.
Yes, that was my friend saying well done for managing to blow out a birthday candle on my dragon-shaped cake like a 5-year-old who just stopped climate change or discovered life on Mars. That was the theme on the Infinite Monkey Cage on Radio 4, where Brian Cox and Robin Ince visited NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory and met scientists, as well as comedian and space nerd Conan O'Brien, to discuss the bits of space dust and pieces of Mars that are now on their way to us.
Is it right, Kevin, that this is going to be the first actual, sample of extraterrestrial rocks since Apollo missions?
Well, we have brought back things like stardust from previous missions that have gone out into space and collected pieces. We've also got OSIRIS-REx that is en route to returning a sample from an asteroid. But these are the first samples that are being specifically returned to look for signs of ancient life. And that's tremendously exciting. When we think about the vast population of the universe, it's a transformative moment, potentially, because if life is out there, then we instantaneously transform not just our own solar system, but all the stars that we see into a biological universe. Because whether or not we discover life on Mars or life on Europa or Enceladus or Titan or what have you, that gives us this indication that life arose twice in our own backyard, and therefore life should arise wherever the conditions are right.
Conan, with that, the discovery of single cells, all joking aside, what would that mean to you? Would you find that to be a tremendous moment, that
Yeah, I think it would be huge. I mean, all kidding aside, I think it would be massive. I think it would have lots of implications. I think there's going to have theological implications on Earth, because I think there's a huge element of the human being that wants to think we are it, we are the divine selection, we are the one God created us. And when you start finding organisms on other planets, that might topple that apple cart for some people. I don't think it should be exclusive. I think life on other planets shouldn't rattle people's beliefs, but it may. And so it's huge. It would be massive. I'm still going to go back to my desire, my deep desire that it's an alien with some kind of ship and some grand design to destroy us, but we defeat it in the end. And if you film it, it lasts about an hour and 40 minutes. But that's just my own bias. But I think it would be huge.
I was wondering, Casey, in the early days, in terms of deciding what you're going to target, because there was a period of time, wasn't there, when after early investigation of Mars, it was kind of just said, there's nothing's going to happen here, and there had to be quite arguments, I think, to say we need to keep looking at Mars. What was it that managed to keep that investigation going on?
Well, I think many people have thought for decades that Mars is largely a volcanic planet. And again, volcanoes, they can create some potential habitable environments, but the kind of temperatures and pressures that are reached in those kinds of processes are not particularly conducive to life. And so I think it's two things that really changed the focus on Mars. And so one was the recognition that Mars is not just a volcanic planet, but it has a sedimentary rock record, so a rich record of sedimentary surface processes involving primarily water, as wind as well, but water being a really important part of that. And there's been speculation for 100, 200 years that water was present on Mars, but I think even just in the past 20, 30 years, we've made major advances in understanding about the presence of water on Mars, the extent of those reservoirs. And then I think the other thing was really the meteorite, ALH 84001, and the tantalizing potential of that meteorite from Mars to have signs of ancient life. I think ultimately now, decades later, the community is largely in agreement that there weren't signs of ancient life, although, folks still question that. But I think that potential of life in that meteorite really kicked off the past 2 decades of searching for life on Mars and recognizing that potential is there, and it's worth, with the diversity we've now recognized on the surface of Mars and how similar Mars might have once been to our own planet, really increasing the interest in searching for signs of ancient life on Mars.
The thought of ancient life on Mars and even present life out there somewhere is increasingly being discussed as scientific possibility and not just science fiction. It speaks to that base need to feel that there's more meaning to life than just getting through it, that there's a point to all of this. Some of us find that stuff in God. Jimi Hendrix found it on occasion with the help of some acid.
A lot of kids, don't find nothing in church. I remember when I got thrown out of church because I had the improper clothes on. I had tennis shoes and a suit, and they said, well, that's not proper. So we don't have no money to get anything else. So I just got thrown out of church anyway, and it's nothing but an institution. So they're going to have to find nothing.
But the guitar, Jimmy would have been 80 this month. Instead, he's immortal. On Soul Music, we heard from the endurance runner Lee Perry, who lost his mother in January 2021. The very next day, he began working through his grief with the Open Road, his trainers, and Kate Bush.
The following day was hard. I woke up on the Sunday morning and realised that for 2.5, 3 years, I'd spent every day going to see her, talking to her, and then she was gone. And then there was no more phone calls, and then there was no more hospital visits. And it was a struggle. It was a real big struggle. So I decided to deal with it in the only way I know how, and that is to get out and run. So I went and ran a marathon the following day, Kate Bush in my headphones for all 4 hours of that run. I hadn't really trained for it. I wasn't really concentrating on where I was going. I was just running down deserted roads early on a frosty, cold Sunday morning in January. I was just running and thinking about the good times and not the sad times, and thinking about all the Christmases, thinking about all the birthdays and all of the grandchildren and great-grandchildren that she had. The words say, and if only I could, I'd make a deal with God. And while I was running, it occurred to me that a lot of the mentality I used to run long distances is a lot of the same mentality that my mum used to get through her treatment. She was convincing herself to make a deal that I'm staying around as long as I can. And when that song came on, I was running along with tears streaming down my face. And it just meant so much. That song always will.
I'm really grateful to Lee for sharing that story, and to Kate for the music. The ability to run, walk, or move is taken for granted by so many of us. Walking makes me feel better about everything. It really does. What then if one day you just can't move? That's exactly what happened to Jason after an accident and a terrible brain injury. Doctors believed he'd never walk again. He had to learn from scratch at the same time as his baby son, Jack. Here's Jason with his wife, Liz, on Life Changing, talking to Dr. Sean Williams.
My life and Jack's were kind of running parallel. So when I came out of the hospital, he was, 14 months old? Mm-hmm. And he was crawling, but he was just starting to pull himself up onto his feet. So I thought, well, I'm going to learn to walk before you. And so there was this bit of grass overlooking the Morecambe Bay, and Liz would be there encouraging us both. And I've got this beautiful picture of us both waddling along together, and I think Jack's ahead of me actually, so we were having a race to see who could learn to walk again.
It sounds quite competitive between you and your toddler son.
Yes. You know, the thing that drove me on the most, I suppose, was that after I put my family through so much trauma, and what I put them through was just unforgivable, really. And I thought, well, the way I can pay them back, however, was to actually do my best to get back to the person I was before. After I'd learned to walk with Jack, then we were actually planning our wedding for the August. So this was about 9 months after I'd left hospital. And the church was packed, and we did the conventional thing, walked down the aisle, exchanged rings and signed the register, and then turned round and walked back up the aisle with everyone around watching us. And I thought, well, I can walk now, so I'll show them everyone I can walk. I'll actually I'll jog. So it was a bit bizarre, really. I must be the only person who got married at the front of the church and then ran away from the bride on the way out.
Later in the programme, Jason shared his gratitude for the immovable love of his family.
I suppose the main thing that is so significant for me about the whole thing is that the whole process of recovery has been Liz's incredible love and devotion for me, and that there's no way I would be here without
Don't worry, darling.
She's my rock. She's always there for me, and I'll always be there for her.
Thank you, sweetie.
The incredible Jason and Liz on Life Changing. Memories of family doing brilliant things were featured on Saturday Live this week with the poet Nikita Gill. But before we get to that, I want you to hear the handover on the Today programme that morning.
Yeah, well, let's find out a little what's happening a little later here on Radio 4 with Nikita Gill, who's on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you got for us?
What? Just, I'm a poet. I write poetry, and I am here to just talk about poems, basically, and how much they can help people.
Okay, well, we look forward to that, Nikita. That's after 9 o'clock in about 28 minutes, when we have Saturday Live coming up later on this morning. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm taking a guess, but it sounded to me like the Today programme meant to link to a studio to speak with Nikki Bedi, who fronts Saturday Live, to ask what was coming up, rather than Nikita Gill, who, as you heard, is a poet and most definitely doesn't know what's coming up. I love live radio so much, and this did make me smile. Later that morning, on Saturday Live itself, Nikita shared a story about her grandfather as a teenager.